I am Kelsey Grant, and I am 29 years old. Christmas Eve was supposed to be the night my family found out they were finally getting a grandchild. Instead, it turned into the night my own father looked me straight in the eye across the dinner table and erased me from his life with one sentence. The house was full of polished silverware, expensive wine, and fake smiles. I waited until everyone had taken a bite of prime rib, set my fork down, and said as calmly as I could, "I am pregnant." For half a second, no one moved. My mother's hand froze around her glass. My sister stared at me like she was watching a movie. My father leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight, his eyes cold in a way I had never seen before. He didn't ask who the father was. He didn't ask if I was happy or healthy. He didn't ask anything. He just said a few quiet, careful words about my baby that I won't repeat here, then added, "You are not part of this family anymore. You are out of the will." That was it. Years of doing everything right, wiped out between the salad and dessert. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I reached under my chair, took the small, perfectly wrapped present I had brought just for him, and set it in the middle of the table. Then I pushed back my chair, wished everyone a Merry Christmas, and walked out of that house. Before I tell you what he said next, and what he did when he opened that box, tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far this story travels. What would you do if your parents sold your home to pay off your brother's gambling debt? Let me know below. I sat in my battered sedan just outside the iron gates, the engine cold and silent. I didn't drive away. I didn't sob into the steering wheel. Instead, I reached into the passenger seat and pulled out my laptop. The screen glowed to life, casting a harsh blue light across my face. The only warmth I was going to feel tonight. I logged into Ghost Ledger, the shadow interface I had built 4 years ago, to manage the hemorrhage of cash that kept the Bel Air estate breathing. Inside that dining room, Robert was probably laughing, pouring another glass of the vintage red I had paid for, thinking he had just solved his debt problem by selling my sanctuary. He was about to open the envelope I had left on the table. He probably expected a check. Maybe a desperate letter begging for a second chance. I watched the surveillance feed on my screen. He tore the paper open. His smile faltered. He didn't find a check. He found his matte black Centurion card, cut precisely in half, and underneath it, a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper with 3 words printed in bold, sans serif font. Notice of default. "You want to evict me?" I whispered to the pixelated figure on my screen. "Let's see how you handle an eviction from reality." My finger hovered over the execute key. This wasn't a tantrum. It was a foreclosure. I pressed the button. Instantaneously, the Bel Air estate vanished. Every light in the mansion died. The landscape lighting, the chandeliers, the heated pool gone. A second later, the emergency lockdown protocol engaged. The smart gates slammed shut, and the magnetic locks on the doors engaged, sealing them inside their own darkness. Then came the water. The irrigation system, which I had programmed to water the imported orchids at dawn, roared to life at full pressure. But I had overridden the zones. Instead of the garden, the industrial-strength sprinklers turned inward, blasting the outdoor patio where Cynthia loved to host her midnight tea parties, soaking the silk cushions and the expensive rugs. Inside the dark house, phone screens started lighting up the panic. I tracked the notifications in real time. Brandon's phone pinged first. Alert. GPS tracker. Activated. Repossession. Team en route. His beloved Porsche, the one Robert had bought him with the proceeds from my apartment, was broadcasting its location to the repo man I had hired an hour ago. Then Jessica's phone. Alert. Corporate card suspended. Fraud investigation initiated. I watched them scramble through the windows. Shadows running into furniture. Their screams muffled by the thick glass I had paid to install. They thought they could sell my roof to pay for their vices. They thought I was just the wallet, the silent partner they could discard when the balance ran low. I closed the laptop. The glow vanished, leaving me in the comforting dark. They had sold my shelter to keep their sky bright. So, I took the sky. I started the engine. As I pulled away, the only light in the rearview mirror was the frantic flashlight beams bouncing around a house that was no longer a home. It was a prison. And I held the only key. I didn't make it to the street. Before my tires even hit the asphalt, the world exploded into blinding white light. A cruiser screeched across the driveway entrance, blocking the gate, its red and blues strobing against the dark trees. 2 more pulled up behind me, boxing me in. I took my foot off the gas, my heart hammering a sudden, violent rhythm against my ribs. This wasn't a noise complaint. This was a raid. The passenger door of the lead cruiser opened, and Jessica stepped out. She wasn't wearing her usual silk pajamas or the party dress she had on 10 minutes ago. She had thrown on a blazer over her evening wear, a costume change for the performance of her life. She gestured toward my car, her face a mask of terrified concern. A paramedic team was right behind her, pushing a gurney across the gravel. I rolled down my window just an inch as an officer approached, his hand resting cautiously on his holster. "Ma'am, turn off the vehicle and step out slowly," he ordered. "Officer, this is a misunderstanding," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "I am leaving my parents' house. I haven't done anything wrong." "She's in the car!" Jessica shouted, running up to the officer, breathless. "Officer, please, be careful. She's having a psychotic break. She cut the power to the house and told us she was going to drive off a cliff. She's pregnant and she's not lucid." The officer's posture shifted. He didn't see a woman escaping a toxic dinner. He saw a liability. A manic, pregnant woman, in a beat-up sedan with a laptop glowing on the passenger seat, the very picture of instability. "Step out of the car, ma'am," he repeated, firmer this time. "We just want to make sure you are safe." Cynthia came running out of the dark house then, flanked by Robert. She wasn't holding a wine glass anymore. She was clutching her chest, sobbing with a theatricality that would have impressed Broadway. "Kelsey! Oh God, Kelsey, please don't hurt the baby. We can fix this. Just come inside." I looked at them, really looked at them, and the cold realization washed over me. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a 51-50 involuntary psychiatric hold. If I stepped out and screamed, I proved them right. If I drove away, I was fleeing the police. If I stayed silent, I was catatonic. Jessica knew the law better than anyone. She knew that if she could get me committed for 72 hours, she could file for an emergency conservatorship. She could gain control of my medical decisions, my location, and most importantly, my assets. She wasn't trying to help me. She was trying to seize the hand that fed her before it could close the wallet forever. I looked at Jessica's eyes through the glass. There was no concern there. There was only the cold, hard glint of a predator cornered. For years I had wondered why they couldn't just ask me for help. Why did they have to steal, manipulate, and bully? I finally understood. It wasn't just greed. It was survival. To people like them, people whose entire identity is built on a foundation of unearned status, the loss of money isn't just a hardship. It is an annihilation of the self. When I cut the power, I didn't just inconvenience them. I shattered the mirror they used to admire themselves. Without the mansion, the cars, the platinum cards, they didn't exist. And when a narcissist faces the death of their ego, they don't beg. They destroy the threat. I was the threat. And they were going to bury me in the system to keep their illusion alive. "Ma'am!" the officer barked, tapping the glass with his flashlight. "Out of the vehicle. Now." I looked at the laptop sitting on the passenger seat. My ghost ledger. My proof. If I got out of this car, that laptop would disappear into evidence or custody, and I would never see it again. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and stepped out into the blinding light. I raised my hands, palms open. "I am not unstable," I said, pitching my voice to carry over the siren's wail, clear and sharp. "I am the Chief Financial Officer of KG Holdings. I am currently executing a foreclosure on this property due to default, and the people standing behind you aren't concerned family members. They are debtors attempting to weaponize the police to stop an eviction." Jessica's eyes widened. She hadn't expected me to speak their language. "She's delusional," Jessica shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Officer, look at her. She thinks she's a CFO. She lives in a studio apartment. Grab her before she hurts herself." The officer reached for my arm. The paramedic moved in with a sedative. The trap was snapping shut. Time didn't just stop. It shattered. As the officer's fingers tightened around my bicep and the paramedic uncapped a needle, the world dissolved into a series of jagged flashbacks. This wasn't the first time I had been cornered by them. It was just the first time they had used the police to do it. I was 22 again, sitting at the kitchen island in this very house. I had just graduated, hungry and broke. Robert slid a piece of paper across the marble counter. It wasn't a congratulations card. It was an itemized invoice. Room and board, $800. Utilities, $150. Food, $200. "You're a bad investment, Jade," he had said, not even looking up from his newspaper. "If you want to stay under this roof, you sign. Interest accrues daily." He made me sign a promissory note for a tuna sandwich. That was the moment the chain locked around my neck. They spent decades drilling a single, poisonous truth into my skull. I was a deficit, a burden, a line item in red ink that needed to be balanced. They gaslighted me into believing that my very existence was a debt I could never fully repay. So I tried. God help me, I tried. I looked at Cynthia, wailing into her silk handkerchief by the gate. She didn't know about Ghost Ledger. She didn't know about the shell company I created, Obsidian Consulting. For 4 years, I funneled $1.8 million of my own post-tax income into their accounts disguised as consulting fees and dividends. I didn't do it for credit. I did it anonymously because I knew their egos were too fragile to accept money from the daughter they called a failure. I bought their dignity while they stripped mine for parts. The memory shifted. 2 years ago. Brandon stood in the foyer, blood running down his chin. 2 debt collectors waiting on the porch. He owed 6 figures to people who didn't use lawyers. I sold my first startup that afternoon. I liquidated my entire portfolio to pay his ransom. And what did Robert tell the neighbors the next day? Brandon handled it. He's a shark. Smart kid. I stood in the shadows of the hallway, invisible, holding the empty bank receipt. The officer pulled me forward, snapping me back to the present. The cold metal of the car door bit into my back. I looked at them now. Really looked at them. They weren't a family in crisis. They were parasites panicking because the host had finally developed an immune system. They didn't want to save me from psychosis. They wanted to sedate the ATM before it walked away. The guilt that had choked me for 29 years evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, diamond-hard clarity. I didn't owe them my life. I had already paid for it. With interest. Don't touch me, I said. It wasn't a scream. It was a command, low and lethal. I ripped my arm away from the officer's grip with a force that surprised us both. I wasn't the scared 22-year-old signing invoices for sandwiches anymore. I was the one holding the pen. You want to talk about mental stability? I looked straight at the officer, my eyes locking onto his. Let's talk about the $1.8 million these people stole from me. And let's talk to my lawyer. I raised my phone. I didn't dial 911. I dialed the only person who terrified Jessica more than I did. Grace, I said into the speakerphone as it connected. We have a situation. Officer. Grace's voice cut through the chaotic noise of the sirens like a scalpel. This is Grace Sterling, managing partner at Sterling & Vance. I represent Miss Jade Miller. Are you currently detaining my client? The officer holding my arm hesitated. He looked at the phone, then at me, then back at Jessica. The power dynamic on the driveway shifted instantly. He wasn't dealing with a hysterical girl anymore. He was dealing with a liability. Ma'am, we are conducting a welfare check based on a report of an acute psychotic break, the officer said, though his grip loosened slightly. The family states she is a danger to herself. The family, Grace repeated, her tone dripping with professional disdain, is currently in default on a $1.8 million loan owed to my client. Unless you have a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation signed by a judge, or immediate physical evidence of self-harm, detaining my client based on the hearsay of her debtors is a violation of her civil rights. And if you facilitate the seizure of her assets, specifically the laptop she is protecting, I will file a federal lawsuit against your department for assisting in corporate espionage. Jessica stepped forward, her face flushing a dangerous shade of red. She's lying. She doesn't have a lawyer. That's probably just her friend acting. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just tapped the screen of my phone and pulled up an email from 6 days ago. I turned the brightness up to maximum and held it in front of the officer's face. From Jessica subject. Monthly allowance. Transfer the usual $40,000 plus a bonus for the baby shower. Or I'll start telling people about your episodes again. You know how mom gets when she thinks you're off your meds. Pay up, Jade. The officer read it. He read it twice. Then he shone his flashlight on Jessica. This is dated last Tuesday, the officer said, his voice flat. You're asking for money from the woman you just claimed is mentally incompetent? Jessica scrambled. That's out of context. She owes us that money. She manages the family trust. There is no trust, I said calmly. There is just me, paying for your lifestyle. And I stopped. The officer let go of my arm. He took a step back, looking from the darkened mansion to my beat-up car, doing the math. He realized he had walked into a minefield. This wasn't a medical emergency. It was a hostage situation. And he had almost helped the kidnappers. Okay, the officer said, raising his hands. Everyone, calm down. We are not doing this in the driveway. We are going to go inside, turn on some lights, and verify who actually owns what property. If this is a civil dispute, we are leaving. Officer. You can't, Jessica started. Inside. He barked. Now. Cynthia grabbed Robert's arm, looking terrified. Brandon was already retreating toward the front door, looking for a way out. I grabbed my laptop from the passenger seat, clutching it to my chest like a shield. I knew what going inside meant. It meant walking back into the cage. It meant stepping onto their turf, where the shadows were deep and the walls were thick. But this time, I wasn't walking in as the daughter they could bully. I was walking in as the landlord. Stay on the line, Grace, I whispered. I'm right here, she answered. Don't let them out of your sight. I walked into the house I had paid for, through rooms lit by police flashlights in fear. The officer told me to set my laptop down and prove ownership. One click would expose everything: the shell company, the wire transfers, the truth behind their trust fund. I opened the computer and began explaining the numbers, the dates, the crises each deposit covered. That's when Brandon moved. He didn't trip. He lunged, knocking a heavy crystal vase straight onto my keyboard. Glass shattered. Water flooded the laptop. Sparks flared. Then black. My records, my proof. Gone. Immediately, they turned on me. Cynthia screamed that I destroyed the evidence. Robert demanded my arrest. Brandon smirked. The officer's tone hardened without the computer. My story couldn't be verified. Jessica leaned close and whispered that without proof, I was just an unstable pregnant woman. Conservatorship by morning. My money. Gone. They thought the leverage lived in the laptop. I stayed calm. You're right, I said. The computer is dead. But you really think I kept $1.8 million of leverage in something that can get wet? I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of old greeting cards. Christmas cards. Birthday cards. Thank you notes. Each one contained a handwritten message and microprint beneath the signature. Promissory notes. Demand loans. Signed by them. 42 cards. Every bailout documented. Total debt. $1.8 million plus interest. Jessica went pale. These are legally binding. I declared default. The collateral clause transferred any occupied real property to me. This house is the collateral, I said. And you're in default. The officer understood instantly. They weren't victims anymore. They were trespassers. They were given 10 minutes to leave. Christmas Eve, garbage bags. No dignity, no money, no house. When the door finally shut, the silence was complete. I called the contractor, changed the locks, lit a single candle. I placed a hand on my stomach. You start with zero debt, I whispered. Then I blew out the flame.